Hans Zimmer, not the famed composer but a brash, self-made film director worth millions, stood in the penthouse office of his Manhattan production studio, staring out at the city's jagged skyline. At 42, he was a man who commanded rooms, his name synonymous with blockbuster epics that blended raw emotion with visual spectacle. His life was a curated masterpiece, tailored suits, a tribe loft, a private jet, and a rotating cast of starlets who hung on his every word. Yet, as he gazed at the glittering lights below, a hollow ache gnawed at him, one he couldn't name. Success had become a treadmill, each victory less satisfying than the last. He was restless, untethered, searching for something real in a world he'd polished to perfection. The studio was quiet that evening, the usual buzz of assistants and editors replaced by the hum of air conditioning. Hans had stayed late, tweaking the final cut of his latest film, a sci-fi thriller set to dominate the summer box office. He was obsessive about detail, so every frame, every note, every beat had to resonate. But tonight, his mind wandered. He tossed his Mont Blanc pen onto the desk and wandered the halls, his polished loafers clicking against the marble floor. The cleaning crew was in, their carts rattling faintly in the distance. He barely noticed them, usually they were invisible, part of the machinery that kept his world pristine. Then he saw her. She was in the executive bathroom, kneeling by the toilet, her gloved hands scrubbing with a quiet intensity. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, strands escaping to frame a face that was neither glamorous nor plain or just honest. Her uniform was faded, the kind of navy blue smock that blended into the background. She didn't notice him at first, her focus absolute, humming a soft tune under her breath. Hans froze in the doorway, struck by something he couldn't articulate. It wasn't her appearance, though she was striking in a way that didn't scream for attention. It was her presence, unassuming, grounded, like she belonged to a world he'd forgotten existed. He should have walked away. He was Hans Zimmer, director of worlds, not a man who lingered in doorways watching cleaning ladies. But his feet stayed planted. She looked up, startled, her eyes meeting his. They were brown, deep and unguarded, with a flicker of surprise that quickly turned to polite deference. "Sorry, sir," she said, her voice soft but steady, accented faintly a Eastern European. "Maybe I'll be out in a minute." "No, no," Hans stammered, caught off guard by his own awkwardness. "Take your time. I'm just a broken bar passing through." He cringed internally. Passing through? To where? The sink? She nodded, returning to her work, but Hans felt a pull, like a tide dragging him towards something he didn't understand. "What's your name?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. She paused, glancing at him with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "Elena," she said simply, then resumed scrubbing. "No last name, no embellishment, just Elena." Hans nodded, as if that explained everything, and retreated to his office, his heart thudding inexplicably. He didn't know why her name felt like a note he'd been searching for in a score he couldn't finish. Over the next week, Hans found himself lingering at the studio after hours, hoping to catch another glimpse of Elena. He didn't admit it to himself, not fully. He told himself he was working late, refining shots, chasing perfection. But his eyes kept drifting to the hallways, to the faint sound of a cleaning cart. When he saw her again, she was wiping down a conference table, her movements precise, almost meditative. He tried to strike up a conversation, but his usual charm honed on red carpets and in boardrooms felt hollow. "Do you like working here?" he asked, wincing at the banality of it. Elena shrugged, not looking up. "It's a job. Pays the rent." Her bluntness disarmed him. No one spoke to Hans Zimmer like that, as if he were just another guy. He pressed on, asking about her life, her accent. "She was from Poland," she said, "here 5 years, working 2 jobs to support her mother back home." She didn't elaborate, and Hans didn't push, but he felt a spark of something, of admiration, maybe, or envy for her clarity of purpose. He started finding excuses to be near her. He'd leave his office door open, pretending to review scripts while stealing glances as she vacuumed the hallway. He noticed small things, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear, the faint smile when she thought no one was watching, the dog-eared paperback she kept in her cart at Dostoevsky, Of all things. He bought a copy and read it in one feverish night, hoping to find something to say that wouldn't sound like a line. But when he tried quoting a passage to her, she just laughed, a sound so warm it made his chest ache. "You read that for me?" she teased, her eyes twinkling. "You must be bored." He wasn't bored. He was obsessed. Hans Zimmer, who dated models and actresses, who'd never wanted for attention, was falling for a woman who cleaned toilets for a living. It made no sense, and yet it made all the sense in the world. She was real in a way nothing in his life had been for years. No pretense, no agenda. Just Elena, with her quiet strength and her unguarded laugh. But there was a problem, a big one. Hans had a condition, a rare neurological quirk diagnosed after a car accident in his 20s. It wasn't amnesia, not exactly, but his brain struggled to form new long-term memories. He could remember his childhood, his films, his craft, but new faces, new moments, they slipped away like sand through a sieve. He relied on notebooks, voice memos, and a meticulous assistant to keep his life in order. He'd learned to fake it, to smile through the fog, to pretend he remembered people he'd met a dozen times. But with Elena, he didn't want to fake it. He wanted to hold on to her, to etch her into his mind. He started writing her name in his notebook, over and over, like a schoolboy with a crush. Elena, cleaning lady, polish, brown eyes, Dostoevsky. He recorded voice memos describing her laugh, her accent, the way she moved. He took a photo of her car discreetly, when she wasn't looking, and taped it into his journal. It was madness, he knew, but he couldn't stop. Every night, he'd review his notes, desperate to keep her from fading. And every morning, he'd wake with a vague sense of loss, her face a blur, until he opened his notebook again. One evening, he found her in the break room, eating a sandwich alone. He sat across from her, ignoring the voice in his head screaming that this was inappropriate, that he was crossing lines. "Why do you stay so late?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Don't you have a fancy life to get to?" He laughed, surprised by her directness. "Fancy gets old," he said. "What about you? 2 jobs, no rest. What keeps you going?" She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment, he felt seen, not as Hans Zimmer, the director, but as a man. "My mother," she said. "She's sick. Needs medicine. I send what I can." She paused, then added, "And I like it here. It's quiet at night. Feels like the world slows down." He wanted to tell her everything, his condition, his fear of forgetting her, the way she'd cracked open something inside him. But he didn't. Instead, he said, "You make this place better, Elena. You don't even know it." She blushed, brushing it off, but he saw the flicker of a smile. They started talking more. Brief moments at first, passing comments about books, music, the city. Then longer conversations, late at night, when the studio was empty. She told him about growing up in a small Polish village, about her father's death, about her dream of studying literature before life got in the way. He told her about his films, his love for storytelling, his struggle to feel anything real anymore. He didn't mention his condition, not yet. He was afraid it would scare her off, or worse, make her pity him. One night, he brought her coffee, a small gesture that felt monumental. She accepted it with a grin, teasing him about the fancy brand. They sat on the steps outside the studio, the city humming around them, and for the first time in years, Hans felt anchored. He didn't need his notebook to remember this moment. It was vivid, electric, like a scene from one of his films. He wanted to kiss her, to tell her he was falling in love, but he held back. She deserved more than a fleeting impulse from a man who might forget her by morning. The next day, disaster struck. Hans woke to a blank slate, his mind wiped clean of the previous night. He opened his notebook, read the name Elena, and felt a jolt, but it was abstract, like reading about a character in a script. He went to the studio, desperate to see her, to rebuild the connection. But when he found her, cleaning a window, she looked at him with a guarded expression. "You okay, Mr. Zimmer?" she asked. "You seem a broken bar different." He panicked. Had he forgotten something important? Had he said too much? He fumbled through the conversation, relying on his notes, but it felt wrong, like acting a part he didn't understand. She noticed, her warmth replaced by polite distance. He wanted to explain, to tell her about his condition, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he retreated, promising himself he'd fix it tomorrow. But tomorrow was worse. His notes were there, but the feeling was fading. He saw her in the hallway, and she was just a broken bar woman. Beautiful, yes, but a stranger. He read his notebook like a script, trying to summon the emotions he'd described, but they were ghosts. He approached her anyway, determined to keep her in his life. "Elena," he said, his voice strained. "Can we talk?" She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "You don't remember, do you?" she said quietly. "Last night you told me things about your life, a broken bar problem." His heart sank. He'd confessed, and now it was gone. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean to." "It's okay," she cut him off, her tone gentle but firm. "You can't help it." "But I can to broken bar. I can't be someone you forget every day." She walked away, leaving him with his notebook and a hollow chest. Hans didn't give up. He couldn't. Even as Elena's face blurred in his mind, his notebook became a lifeline, a map to a feeling he refused to lose. He wrote feverishly, filling pages with every detail he could recall or reconstruct: her laugh, her stories, the way she made him feel alive. He hired a neurologist, a specialist in memory disorders, and threw money at experimental treatments, anything to hold on to her. He didn't care if it was irrational love, he decided, was worth fighting for, even if it was a battle against his own brain. Elena kept her distance, her warmth replaced by professionalism. But Hans was relentless. He left notes for her, simple ones, handwritten, slipped into her cart when she wasn't looking. "You make the world brighter," one said. "I'm trying to remember you," said another. She never mentioned them, but he noticed she stopped throwing them away. One night, he found her reading one, her expression unreadable. "You don't give up, do you?" she said, not unkindly. "I can't," he admitted. "You're worth it." He showed her his notebook, pages filled with her name, her essence. "This is how I keep you," he said. "Even when my brain lets go, my heart doesn't." Elena softened, but she was cautious. "You can't build a life on notes, Hans," she said. "What happens when you forget why you wrote them?" "Then I'll start over," he said. "Every day, if I have to." She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. They started again, slowly. A coffee breaks, late night talks, moments that Hans recorded obsessively. He got better at it, using his director's eye to capture her in vivid detail. And slowly, something shifted. Elena saw his effort, his refusal to let her slip away. One night, she kissed him, a soft, tentative brush of lips that felt like a victory. "You're crazy," she whispered, but she was smiling. Hans Zimmer, not the composer but a brash, self-made film director with a 9-figure net worth, stood in his sleek Manhattan studio office, the city's skyline sprawling below like a set from one of his own blockbusters. At 42, he was a titan of the industry, known for crafting cinematic worlds that left audiences breathless. His life was a montage of success, a tribe loft, a private jet, tailored suits, and a revolving door of actresses who adored his charisma. Yet, as he stared at the twinkling lights, a restless void gnawed at him. The thrill of premieres and awards had dulled, leaving him chasing a feeling he couldn't name. Something raw, something true. It was late. The studio hushed after a long day of editing his latest sci-fi epic. Hans lingered, tweaking frames, obsessing over details. The cleaning crew was in, their carts rattling faintly in the distance, invisible cogs in his polished world. He barely noticed them, until he wandered into the executive bathroom and saw her. She was kneeling by the toilet, scrubbing with quiet focus, her dark hair escaping a messy bun. Her face wasn't glamorous, but it was striking, honest, unguarded, with deep brown eyes that flickered with life. Her navy smock faded into the background, but she didn't. She was humming softly, a melody he didn't recognize, and Hans felt something shift inside him, like a lens snapping into focus. He stood frozen in the doorway, a man used to commanding attention now unsure of his own presence. She glanced up, startled, her eyes meeting his with a mix of surprise and deference. "Sorry, sir," she said, her voice soft, accented a polish. "Maybe I'll be done soon." Hans fumbled, his usual polish deserting him. "No rush," he said, wincing at his own awkwardness. "I'm just a broken bar here." Lame, he thought, but he couldn't move. "What's your name?" he asked, the question slipping out unbidden. "Elena," she replied, simple and direct, then returned to her work. No flourish, no pretense, just Elena. Hans retreated to his office, her name echoing in his mind like a chord he couldn't shake. He didn't understand why it hit him so hard, but he felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. Over the next week, Hans found himself staying late, hoping to see her again. He told himself it was work of Final Cuts, sound mixer, but he was kidding himself. His eyes scanned the halls for her cart, her shadow. When he saw her wiping down a glass table, her movements precise and unhurried, he tried talking to her. His charm, usually effortless, felt clunky. "Do you like it here?" he asked, cringing at the question's banality. "It's a job," she said, not looking up. "Keeps the lights on." Her bluntness threw him. No one spoke to Hans Zimmer like that, as if he were just a guy. He learned she was Polish, 5 years in New York, working 2 jobs to send money to her sick mother. She didn't overshare, and he didn't push, but her honesty was a revelation. She was real, unpolished, a stark contrast to his curated world. He started seeking her out, leaving his office door open, pretending to read scripts while watching her vacuum. He noticed her details, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear, the faint smile when she thought no one saw, the worn copy of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment in her cart. He bought the book, read it in a single night, hoping to impress her. When he quoted a line, she laughed at a warm, unguarded sound that made his chest ache. "You read that for me?" she teased. "You must have too much time." He didn't. He was falling for her, a cleaning lady who saw through his veneer. But there was a catch. Hans had a neurological condition from a car accident in his 20s. Not full amnesia, but his brain struggled to lock in new memories. He remembered his craft, his past, but new faces and moments slipped away. He relied on notebooks, voice memos, and a sharp assistant to function. With Elena, he was terrified she'd fade like everything else. He wrote her name obsessively: Elena, Polish, brown eyes, Dostoevsky, and recorded memos about her laugh, her accent. He snapped a discreet photo of her cart, taping it into his journal. It was desperate, but he needed her to stay real. Their conversations grew brief at first, then longer, late at night when the studio was empty. He brought her coffee once, a small act that felt huge. They sat on the studio steps, the city humming around them, and he felt anchored. She talked about her village in Poland, her father's death, her abandoned dream of studying literature. He shared his love for storytelling, his fear that his films were all he had. He didn't tell her about his condition, afraid it would break the spell. One night, she looked at him and said, "You're not what I expected." He wanted to kiss her, but he held back. She deserved more than a moment he might forget. Then it unraveled. One morning, he woke to a blank mind, Elena's face a blur. His notebook reminded him of Elena, cleaning lady, coffee on the steps, but it was like reading a stranger's story. He found her in the hallway, and she sensed the disconnect. "You okay, Mr. Zimmer?" she asked, her warmth replaced by caution. He tried to fake it, leaning on his notes, but it was stilted. She knew. "You told me last night," she said quietly, "about your memory." "I'm sorry, Hans, but I can't. A broken bar. I can't be someone you lose every day." She walked away, leaving him with his journal and a hollow ache. Part 2. Hans refused to let her go. Even as Elena's face faded into the fog of his condition, his notebook became a lifeline, a testament to a feeling he couldn't release. Pages filled with her name, her quirks, her stories. Elena, Polish, loves Dostoevsky, sends money to her mother. Became his scripture. He recorded voice memos, describing the warmth of her laugh, the way her eyes crinkled when she teased him. He taped the photo of her cart to his mirror, a daily reminder of what he was fighting for. It was irrational, he knew, a director worth millions chasing a cleaning lady, but love, he decided, didn't care about logic. It was the first real thing he'd felt in years, and he'd be damned if he let it slip away. His condition was a beast, a thief that stole moments as soon as he lived them. Diagnosed after a car accident at 25, It wasn't total amnesia but a glitch in forming new long-term memories. He could recall his childhood, his films, the scripts he'd written, but new faces and conversations dissolved unless he anchored them with notes. He'd built a system of notebooks, voice recordings, an assistant who tracked his life like a script supervisor, but it wasn't enough for Elena. He wanted her etched into his soul, not just his pages. He threw himself into action. He hired a neurologist, a top specialist in memory disorders, and poured money into experimental treatments. There were drugs with unpronounceable names, brain scans, cognitive exercises that left him exhausted. The doctor was blunt. Progress was possible but uncertain. Hans didn't care. He'd spent his career defying odds, crafting impossible films from sheer will. If he could bend reality on screen, he could bend his own mind for her. Elena kept her distance, her warmth replaced by a polite professionalism that cut deeper than rejection. She cleaned the studio as always, but her eyes didn't meet his with the same openness. Hans couldn't blame her. She'd seen that rather that he could pour his heart out one night and wake up a stranger the next. But he was stubborn, a trait that had made him a legend in Hollywood. He started leaving notes for her, small handwritten scraps tucked into her cleaning cart when she wasn't looking. "You make this place alive," one read. "I'm fighting to keep you in my head," said another. He watched her find them, her expression unreadable. But he noticed she kept them, folding them into her pocket instead of the trash. One evening, he caught her reading one in the break room, her fingers tracing the words. "You don't quit, do you?" she said, her voice softer than he expected. There was no anger, just a quiet curiosity, like she was trying to understand this man who refused to let her go. "I can't," he said, stepping closer, his notebook clutched like a shield. "You're worth it, Elena. I don't know how to explain it, but you're the first thing in years that feels real." He opened the notebook, showing her pages filled with her name, her essence captured in frantic scribbles. "This is how I hold on to you. Even when my brain fails, my heart doesn't." She looked at the pages, her eyes tracing the obsessive repetition of her name, the detailed descriptions of their talks, the coffee on the steps, the way she teased him about Dostoevsky. For a moment, she didn't speak, and Hans braced for rejection. Then she said, "You can't live on notes, Hans. What happens when you forget why you wrote them?" "When I'm just a name in a book." "Then I'll start over," he said, his voice raw. "Every day, if I have to. I'll read you like a story I never get tired of." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened, a crack in the wall she'd built. "You're crazy," she said, but there was warmth in it, a flicker of the Elena he'd first met. She didn't say yes, didn't fall into his arms like a movie heroine, but she didn't walk away either. It was enough to keep him going. They started again, slowly, cautiously. Hans was meticulous, recording every moment with here coffee breaks in the break room, late night talks when the studio was empty, the way she laughed when he mispronounced a Polish word. He used his director's eye, capturing her in vivid detail, the curve of her smile, the cadence of her voice, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. His notebook grew thicker, a love story written in fragments. He bought a small digital recorder, whispering memos to himself at night. "Elena, today she told you about her mother's garden. She loves peonies. Don't forget." He didn't always remember the feeling, but he trusted the words, trusted the man who'd written them. Elena watched his efforts, her wariness thawing bit by bit. She started talking to him again, sharing pieces of her life, a childhood memory of her father teaching her to fish, her dream of seeing Paris, her fear that she'd never be more than a cleaning lady. Hans listened, soaking it in, writing it down. He told her about his own fears, and not just the memory loss, but the emptiness that had crept into his life before her. "You make me want to be better," he said one night, sitting across from her in the empty studio cafeteria. "Not just a better director, but a better man." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "You're already a good man, Hans. But there's a broken bar. It's hard. I don't know if I can keep up with your heart when your head keeps letting go." He reached for her hand, a bold move that felt like jumping off a cliff. "Then help me," he said. "Be my memory. Let me be your future." She didn't pull away, but she didn't answer either. Instead, she squeezed his hand, a small gesture that felt like a lifeline. They sat in silence, the hum of the city outside, and Hans felt a peace he hadn't known in years. He wrote it down later. Elena held your hand. It felt like home. The breakthrough came on a rainy night. Weeks later, Hans had stayed late. As usual, his desk littered with notes and coffee cups. Elena was cleaning the conference room, and he watched her through the glass, his heart aching with a mix of help and fear. He approached her, his notebook in hand, and said, "I don't know if I'll remember this tomorrow, but right now, I need you to know something. I love you, Elena. I'm fighting like hell to keep you, and I'll keep fighting, every day, for as long as you'll let me." She froze, her cloth still on the table, and for a moment, he thought he'd lost her. Then she stepped closer, her eyes bright with something he couldn't name. "You're impossible," she said, her voice breaking. And then she kissed him, a soft, tentative brush of lips that felt like a scene he'd directed in his dreams. "You're crazy," she whispered against his mouth, but she was smiling, her hands resting on his chest. It wasn't a fairy tale. His condition didn't vanish, his memory didn't miraculously heal. There were days when he woke up and Elena was a stranger, when he had to read his notebook like a script to remember why his heart raced at the sight of her. But she stayed. She learned to read his notes with him, to laugh when he stumbled over a moment they'd shared. She wrote her own notes sometimes, slipping them into his journal. "You told me you loved me last night. You meant it." They built something fragile but fierce, a love stitched together with words and will. Hans kept working, his films still dazzling the world, but the studio wasn't his center anymore. Elena was. They moved slowly, a coffee dates, walks in Central Park, quiet nights where she read to him from her battered Dostoevsky. He bought her a peony plant, a nod to her mother's garden, and she laughed, calling it sentimental. He wrote it down. "She loves the peonies. She loves you." One night, sitting on his loft's balcony, her head resting on his shoulder, Hans realized he didn't need to remember every moment to know she was his. The feeling was enough, anchored in the weight of her hand in his, the sound of her breathing. His notebook lay open beside him, but he didn't look at it. For once, he didn't need to. "I love you," he said, and she smiled, her eyes reflecting the city lights. Too, he was a cinematic titan, his name synonymous with sweeping epics that married raw emotion to visual grandeur. His life was a carefully crafted scene, tailored suits, a tribe loft, a private jet, and a parade of starlets who hung on his every word. Yet, as he gazed at the city lights, a hollow ache pulsed within him. Success felt like a loop, each triumph less vibrant than the last. He was searching for something real, something to anchor him in a world he'd polished to a sheen. It was late, the studio quiet after a marathon editing session for his latest sci-fi blockbuster. Hans lingered, obsessing over a single frame, chasing perfection. The cleaning crew was in, their carts a faint hum in the background, unnoticed cogs in his pristine machine. Wandering the halls, his loafers clicking on marble, he stepped into the executive bathroom and saw her. She was kneeling by the toilet, scrubbing with quiet focus, her dark hair spilling from a messy bun. Her face wasn't glamorous, but it was strikingly honest, with deep brown eyes that held a quiet strength. Her faded navy smock blended into the background, but she didn't. She hummed a soft, unfamiliar tune, and Hans felt something stir, like a note hitting the perfect pitch. He froze in the doorway, a man used to commanding attention now caught off guard. She looked up, startled, her eyes meeting his with a flicker of surprise that shifted to polite deference. "Sorry, sir," she said, her voice soft, accented a polish. "Perhaps I'll be out soon." Hans, usually slick, fumbled. "No rush," he said, cringing at his own awkwardness. "I'm just a broken bar passing through." Passing through? He cursed himself silently but couldn't move. "What's your name?" he asked, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Elena," she said simply, then resumed her work. No fanfare, no pretense, just Elena. Hans retreated to his office, her name echoing like a melody he couldn't shake. He didn't know why she'd struck him so deeply, but for the first time in years, he felt awake. Over the next week, Hans lingered at the studio after hours, telling himself he was working but scanning the halls for her. He saw her again, wiping down a conference table, her movements precise, almost meditative. He tried talking to her, his usual charm clunky. "Do you like working here?" he asked, wincing at the question's flatness. "It's a job," she said, not looking up. "Pays the rent." Her bluntness disarmed him. No one spoke to Hans Zimmer like that, as if he were ordinary. She was Polish, 5 years in New York, working 2 jobs to support her sick mother back home. She didn't elaborate, and he didn't push, but her honesty was a revelation in his curated world. He sought her out, leaving his office door open, pretending to read scripts while watching her vacuum. He noticed her details, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear, the faint smile when she thought no one saw, the dog-eared Dostoevsky in her cart. He read Crime and Punishment in one feverish night, hoping to connect with her. When he quoted a line, she laughed, warm and unguarded. "You read that for me?" she teased. "You must be bored." He wasn't. He was falling for her. A cleaning lady who saw through his facade. But there was a problem. A neurological condition from a car accident in his 20s. Not full amnesia, but his brain struggled to form new long-term memories. He remembered his craft, his past, but new faces and moments slipped away. He relied on notebooks, voice memos, and an assistant to function. With Elena, he was terrified she'd fade. He wrote her name obsessively: Elena, Polish, brown eyes, Dostoevsky, and recorded memos about her laugh, her accent. He snapped a photo of her cart, taping it into his journal. It was desperate, but he needed her to stay real. Their talks grew are brief exchanges at first, then longer, late-night conversations when the studio was empty. He brought her coffee, a small act that felt monumental. They sat on the studio steps, the city alive around them, and he felt grounded. She shared stories of her Polish village, her father's death, her abandoned dream of studying literature. He told her about his films, his fear that they were all he had. He didn't mention his condition, afraid it would shatter the moment. One night, she said, "You're not what I expected." He wanted to kiss her but held back. She deserved more than a fleeting impulse. Then it fell apart. He woke one morning with a blank mind, Elena's face a blur. His notebook reminded him of Elena. Coffee on the steps, but it was like reading a stranger's story. He found her in the hallway, and she sensed the disconnect. "You okay, Mr. Zimmer?" she asked, her warmth gone. He tried to fake it, leaning on his notes, but it was hollow. She knew. "You told me last night," she said quietly, "about your memory." "I'm sorry, Hans, but I can't be someone you forget every day." She walked away, leaving him with his journal and an ache he couldn't name. Hans didn't surrender. His notebook became a lifeline, pages filled with Elena's essence, her laugh, her stories, the way she made him feel alive. He hired a neurologist, pouring money into experimental treatments to fight his condition. He left notes for her, tucked into her cart. "You make this place brighter." She kept them, and one night, she confronted him. "You don't quit, do you?" she said, softer now. He showed her his notebook, his heart laid bare in ink. "This is how I keep you," he said. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say number. They started again, a coffee, talks, moments he recorded obsessively. One night, she kissed him, a soft, tentative brush of lips. "You're crazy," she whispered, smiling. They built something fragile but real, anchored by his notes and her patience. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. A year later, Hans and Elena were a quiet constant, their love a delicate dance between his fractured memory and her steadfast presence. They'd moved beyond the studio steps, sharing dinners in his loft, walks in Central Park, nights where she read to him from her worn Dostoevsky. His condition hadn't improved, but he'd refined his system: notebooks, digital recorders, a phone app logging every moment with her. He woke each morning to a stranger's face, but his notes told him, "Elena, your love, peonies, Polish accent, home." She'd learned to navigate it, reading his journals with him, laughing when he stumbled over a moment they'd shared. She wrote her own notes sometimes, slipping them into his pages. "You said you loved me last night. You meant it." But the world wasn't as patient as Elena. Hans's next film, a sprawling historical drama, was in pre-production, and the pressure was immense. Investors, studios, and critics watched his every move, whispering about his eccentricities. His assistant, Claire, had always managed his condition discreetly, but the strain was showing. Deadlines loomed, and Hans's obsession with Elena, his need to document every moment, stole hours from his work. Claire found him one morning, bleary-eyed, transcribing a conversation from the night before instead of reviewing storyboards. "Hans, you're losing focus," she said, her voice sharp. "This film could make or break your legacy. You can't keep living in that notebook." He bristled, clutching the journal. "This is my life, Claire, not the film." But her words lingered. He saw the exhaustion in Elena's eyes too, the way she deflected when he asked about her own dreams. She'd given up Somuka, her second job, her privacy, to be with him, to be his memory. He wondered if he was asking too much, if love could survive the weight of his broken mind. One evening, Elena suggested they visit her mother in Poland. "She's getting worse," she said, her voice steady but heavy. "I need to see her, and I want you to come." Hans froze. A trip abroad, away from his controlled environment, was daunting. His system notebooks, routines, Claire's oversight kept him grounded. In a foreign country, with new places and no familiar cues, he'd be adrift. But Elena's eyes held a quiet plea, and he couldn't say number. "Okay," he said, his voice tight. "Let's go." They flew to Warsaw, then drove to a small village nestled in rolling hills. Elena's mother, Anna, lived in a modest house with a garden bursting with peonies. She was frail, her hands trembling as she hugged Elena, but her eyes were sharp, studying Hans with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "So, you're the rich man who forgets my daughter," she said in halting English, her tone cutting through the pleasantries. Elena flushed, but Hans laughed, disarmed by her bluntness. "I'm trying not to," he said, holding up his notebook. Anna snorted but invited him in, her warmth reserved but genuine. Over tea, Elena translated stories of her childhood running through the fields, her father's old fishing boat, the library where she dreamed of being a scholar. Hans scribbled furiously, desperate to capture it all. But the village was overwhelming. Unfamiliar smells, sounds, faces. His notes couldn't keep up, and by the second day, he woke in a panic, Elena's face a blur until he found his journal. She noticed. At night, in their small rented room, she sat beside him, her hand on his. "You're trying so hard," she said softly. "But you don't have to fight alone. I'm here." She took his notebook, reading aloud his description of their first coffee together, her voice steady. "This is us, this is us," she said. "Not just your notes. Us." He pulled her close, his fear easing, but a question lingered. Was he enough for her? The trip shifted something. Back in New York, Hans threw himself into his film, but he also started asking Elena about her dreams. She admitted she'd always wanted to study literature, to teach. "I gave it up," she said, shrugging. "Life happened." Hans saw the resignation in her eyes and hated it. He contacted a university, anonymously funding a scholarship for her. When he told her, she was furious. "I'm not your charity case, Hans," she snapped. "I don't need you to fix my life." "I'm not fixing you," he said, his voice raw. "I'm loving you. I want you to have what you deserve." She softened, but the tension lingered. She enrolled, balancing classes with cleaning, refusing to quit her job. Hans admired her stubbornness but saw the strain. His film wrapped, a critical success, but he barely celebrated. His focus was Elena, their fragile love, and the fear that his condition would break them. One night, after a long day, Elena found him staring at his notebook, his face drawn. "What's wrong?" she asked. He hesitated, then confessed. "I'm scared I'm not enough. That you'll wake up one day and see a man who can't hold on to you without paper and ink." She took the notebook, setting it aside, and cupped his face. "You're more than your memory, Hans. You fight for me every day." "That's enough." She kissed him, fierce and certain, and for the first time, Hans believed her. They built a new rhythm, her studies, his films, their love stitched together with notes and trust. He woke each morning to her name in his journal, but also to her voice, her touch, grounding him. One evening, in their loft, he gave her a peony from her mother's garden, dried and pressed into his notebook. "For you," he said. "For us."